The bright side of addiction is recovery, and recovery is living proof. If you're in recovery or know or love someone who is, or simply want to know more about the recovery process, or maybe you're a bit concerned about someone you know or love, this is the podcast for you, as we carry the message of hope and the promise of recovery. And a reminder, all of our podcasts can be found at recoverycoasttocoast.org. Welcome to episode 53 of Recovery Coast to Coast. On this edition, we visit with an author, sculptor, professor, and more importantly, a person in long-term recovery. 38 years of recovery. Tom Askman is all of this and a whole lot more. He began his journey back when he was at the absolute rock bottom, with a gun in his mouth and his finger on the trigger. Here's a quick clip from today's broadcast.
I was at the end of my ropes. I was thinking suicide on a regular basis. I ended up going upstairs to my old house and loading my shotgun and putting the barrel in my mouth. The only thing that saved me was I had gone to a few AA meetings in my desperation, and as I felt that metal against my teeth, I realized, my God, I'm about ready to do something I can never take back.
According to Tom, he's a man who grew tall but never grew up. His growth stunted by alcoholism. He found the key to recovery 38 years ago and has developed a deep sense of personal freedom. The highlight of his journey, giving back to those who are newcomers. Tom's story is rife with inspiration. And we'll wrap things up with some thoughts on the first year of sobriety and finding the fun in recovery with actor RobLowe. I'm Neil Scott, host of Recovery Coast to Coast, and I want to begin again by expressing my deep gratitude to you for listening. Now, I realize your time's important. There's a lot of podcasts out there. You could be listening to many, many others. I thank you for listening to ours. Our website, by the way, is recoverycoasttocoast.org. You'll find all of our podcasts there. Following 15 years of nightly broadcasting on iHeartRadio in Seattle, our podcast features interviews with everyday people in recovery, as well as clinicians and authors, recovering celebrities, all who offer the promise of hope and the reality of recovery. Plus, well-vetted resources for individuals, families, and friends. We invite you to enjoy the podcast and to share it with your friends as well. Recovery is an American way of life. You want to get in touch with us? Our email address is recoverycoasttocoast, spelled out, at comcast.net. We'd love to hear from you. Recovery Coast to Coast is supported by Sundown M Ranch, one of America's oldest, least expensive, and most successful treatment programs in America. Now, they have a big birthday coming up on March 4th. Sundown will celebrate 55 years of treating individuals, including adolescents and family members, for addictive disease. They are proud to be not only one of the most successful programs in America, but one of the most affordable. They're a not-for-profit treatment program. They can keep their rates really low. They also own their own land on 30 acres at the mouth of the beautiful Yakima River Canyon. Sundown M Ranch is in network with most insurance carriers, and well-trained and empathetic admission specialists will quickly obtain a quote for the patient to get the most benefit available. And if there's a need for financing, well, they can help you with that as well. If you know someone looking for a really good treatment program for addictive disease, I ask you to consider Sundown M Ranch. Sundown M Ranch. It's sundown.org, and it's where recovery begins. Yep, coffee time on Recovery Coast to Coast. Join me with a cup of coffee as we listen to my candid conversation with Tom, a guy with 38 years of one day at a time recovery. Joining us in this segment of Recovery Coast to Coast is Tom Askman. You probably are not familiar with him. I was not until I was alerted to Tom via my friend Chicano Don Tennyson, who's been on the program before. Tom has been in recovery for 38 years of One Day at a Timing. He is kind of an amazing guy. He's a sculptor. He's an author. He's a professor. He wrote a book. I think it's coming out soon, called The Way Back to Being, with the emphasis on the be. I have often said that so often we become human doings and not human beings. So let's welcome Tom to Recovery Coast to Coast. Tom is from Spokane. Hi, Tom. How are you?
Hello there. I'm doing really well. Thank you for giving me this opportunity to bloviate or whatever.
Or whatever. Yes, this is Whatever Anonymous, and you're up. I mentioned you've been in recovery 38 years. What does recovery mean to you today after that length of sobriety?
Well, I reflect on it often because I would have died 38 years ago had I not found AA and started a new journey of awakening, because I was at the end of my ropes. I was thinking suicide on a regular basis. I ended up going upstairs to my old house and loading my shotgun and putting the barrel in my mouth. The only thing that saved me was I had gone to a few AA meetings in my desperation, and as I felt that metal against my teeth, I realized, my God, I'm about ready to do something I can never take back. So the next night I went and shared how close I was at a meeting, and a guy got a hold of me and said, why don't we go through the book and do the steps before you do that stupid thing? And now looking out a window at my house, and I get to reflect often on the fact that I am only alive because I found the rooms of Alcoholics Anonymous. And I get amazed at how this incredible gift keeps on giving to me a new life.
How bad did it get for Tom?
Well, putting a gun in your mouth is probably about as bad as it could get.
What led up to that?
I know now, having hindsight, is that I found alcohol at 14, and I was at that time very shy. Typical alcoholics, I didn't feel like I fit in anywhere, and so alcohol gave me liquid courage. So it helped me get through a lot of stuff. I really believe that alcohol kept me alive for a while there. It became my best friend. But my emotional life was stunted. As soon as I started drinking, there was no way I was going to go emotionally. And so I was living off of my disease. You know, they say alcoholism is a disease. And the alcohol didn't so much turn on me as I kept just experiencing more and more depression. Alcohol quit working after a couple decades. And I started to just kind of go into a darkness. And what I realized only after I got in recovery was that my not growing up, I never did grow up, I just got taller, was because alcohol kept me stunted. It just kept me in a state where I was just wanting to satisfy every craving I had. And they call it alcoholism. I, self, and me. I was completely self-centered and egoic. Not knowing it, I was in a state of complete unawareness, driven by lots and lots of fear. And when I would drink, I had liquid courage, and that took care of a lot of that. But underneath it, I had slowly armored my heart with my mind as a young child. And I realized that only after I got sober and could look back and see how drinking alcohol kept me from ever living authentically. I was living up in my head. And the problem for the alcoholic, as our book says, centers in the mind rather than in the body. So I've got this problem, this disease, this dis-ease in my mind, and I'm disconnected from my heart. I was not able to love. I got married. I was not faithful. I did not really know what it felt like to have an open heart and be present with someone in a state of love and acceptance. The term that I found out not too long ago, just a few years ago, that describes how I wasn't, the term is exquisite vulnerability, which means that when I am living with my heart open, which could not happen when I was drinking, when I'm living with my heart open, I can be with another person and feel that connection of heart to heart and not be caught up in my issues or their issues. And my issues come from my egoic desires and wanting to have my way, and then listening to somebody else throw their issues that they're not resolved with toward me, and then I take it personally, or my ego does. And when I'm in that state, which I was until I got sober and worked the steps and had some time.
How difficult was sobriety for you in the first year?
Sobriety was not that difficult because, I had hit that state of desperation. They say that they wish new people coming in the gift of desperation. And loving myself started to occur fairly on as I went to meetings because I felt connected to other people sitting around talking about the solution that our program says is spiritual in nature. For me, I didn't have any belief in anything religious. I was an atheist. So the first year I started to feel alive in a way I had never felt alive because people cared about me. And they have a saying in AA, it says, let us love you until you can learn to love yourself. And they just were there for me and they supported me. And I started to come out of this shell and this sense of isolation and separateness. And I started to feel like I was a part of this beautiful fellowship of the Spirit. They said, just get in the boat and stay in the boat and you'll be okay. And I started to feel good within a few months. And also I got through the steps right away, which helped a lot.
At the height of your alcoholism, were there people nudging you, talking to you, saying, hey, Tom, you got to do something about your drinking, man. You're out of control?
It wasn't mentioned to me much. And I think part of it was my situation. Like as a college professor in art, I'm not, like nobody comes and checks on you. So you're in there with a class full of students, but there was nobody coming in, and I didn't have to turn in paperwork to prove that I was doing okay. There was nobody saying, hey, you might have a problem. Once or twice it happened, but it wasn't often. When I do remember being confronted once my second year teaching here in Spokane, where the new chair that came in took me in the side one day, and he says he thinks that I might have a problem with alcohol. I just remembered that, but it wasn't common because I wasn't around people that I worked with. So mostly I hung around students, and they like to drink. So students and artists.
What about friends and family? I mean, what was your situation at the time?
Well, I didn't have any family out here. I moved away from Wyoming when I was 20, went away to art school in California and never went back to Wyoming. And so I didn't have family, and the friends that I hung around with that I chose when I got out here were pretty much on my side as far as let's go, we can't have too much fun, let's go drink a lot and be somebody. So a lot of alcohol, and this was before drugs were common. So I just did alcohol. I didn't drink every day. I got drunk about 3-4 times a week. But I can tell you that I never ever thought of only having 1 or 2 drinks and quitting. I drank. I wanted the effect. I wanted to feel different. And so every time I drank, I got drunk.
Tell me about when you were sober, how long it took to really grasp the tenets of the program. You come in, I assume you got a sponsor as you worked the steps. Take me through the process.
Well, when I put that gun on my mouth and I went to a meeting the next night, and the guy came up to me and he said, hey, I heard your story. Before you do something stupid, let's start working the steps tomorrow. We'll get together and read the book and do the steps. And it was a 3-month process to get through all of the steps and read the book. He was one of those old-time book thumpers. He gave me only 2 weeks for the 4th step and 2 weeks on the 9th step.
Wow.
And I was desperate enough, and I was feeling the gifts of AA already, that I felt hope. And in fact, I felt hope the very first meeting I went to. And that was a new feeling for me. So within that first year, I got through all the steps, and he was a cool sponsor because when we did the 12th step, it was at a meeting. He said, you're going to come to the meeting tomorrow. He didn't say that was my 12th step, but at the end of the meeting, he said, you came to a meeting and you're here to, carry the message to alcoholics now because you have completed the steps. He shook my hand. He said, you completed step 12. He said, I want you to find somebody to sponsor within 2 weeks.
Wow.
And I did. And then that's the next beautiful, beautiful step in recovery is to give away what I was so freely given.
You were a professor at the time. How did recovery make you a better teacher?
Wow, that's a great question. In fact, that's maybe the most profound question I've ever been asked, because I started to live more from my heart than my head, and I started to feel more of the pain, the emotional pain that my students were going through, because before I was detached from any of that. It was all, what can I get out of you? I took advantage of many female students. I was just not able to open up and share with students that life can be so much deeper and more substantial and meaningful when one starts to live more spiritually and to have what the book talks about, in the spiritual experiences. As we found we had tapped into a hidden inner resource. And to me, that resource is just simply love. And that I was able to, as a teacher, start sharing more intimately with students, be more concerned about what was going on in their lives, be actually concerned about them, and, offer advice and potential ways for them to start reconnecting to their own authentic nature, which to me was completely covered up with, personality and ego and booze.
Mm. And of course, ego is edging God out.
Absolutely. My ego ain't my amigo anymore. That was a line in a song by Terry Allen, and I heard that even before I got sober. I heard it, but it resonated with me. And what is this ego? And then I get sober, and they talk about ego deflation at depth sufficiently enough to have a spiritual awakening. And that occurred to me, and for me, the gift I was given was my ego was no longer running the show. It was the servant of my spirit. And so I shared that with students for years. In fact, I even made up a couple of T-shirts that I would wear that said, "Your ego ain't your amigo." And then they would ask me about it. So I was sharing those kinds of things with students.
You've written a book, The Way Back to Being. Is it out yet? Is that published yet?
Within a couple of months, it'll be out. And everything in that book is the result of me getting sober and following the principles of AA, and then getting deeper into this spiritual reality, conscious awareness, and, living in love. And I saw on a billboard one time when I was working, I was in the steps somewhere in 3 or 4, and I was questioning some things about, I didn't believe in God, as a religious deity, but I felt love in the meetings. And I see a billboard on a church, big billboard outside, it says, "Love is God's will in action." And so I just got rid of everything but the word love, because that to me is the essence of who I am and who we all are, this thing that happens in our heart. And then they talk about where we find this power. Many places in the book it says we found this power deep down within. We begin to sense the power flowing into us. So this power that to me is an ineffable essence that words can only speak about but are not it, is the greatest gift that anybody could have, is that connection with that source.
You came in and you stayed sober the entire 38 years. A lot of times in meetings, people come in and come out and they say, it doesn't work for me. I tried it, but of course they can still keep coming back. What do you say to someone who has tried AA numerous times and has gone out and come back in and still don't get it?
Well, one of the lines in the book that says, "The hope for the alcoholic is the growth and maintenance of a spiritual condition, and that until they have experienced this spiritual condition, they don't know that there is a beautiful, deep solution within them that will answer the questions and give them such hope and connection and love that they would never want to go back out again. But they haven't maintained a spiritual condition. They haven't experienced it and maintained it, and so they go back out."
So the key, obviously, is spirituality.
It's the key. It's the whole deal. Yeah. It's at 12 inches, the head and the brain right above the eyes, and 12 inches down there is the heart. And you take those 12 steps, and each time you take a step, the ego's deflated a little more until you get to that 12th step. And then you're feeling that connection to the power greater than you are within yourself. And you know you are home. And that is the miracle that I discovered. And when I work with guys, in fact, I've got 2 brand new guys. I haven't had any new ones for a while, but I just did step 3 with both of these guys separately on Sunday of this week. So it's such a, this thing of give it away to keep it.
Absolutely. How is your recovery different today, Tom, than it was 10 years ago?
I just believe, I know I'm experiencing a deeper awareness, a deeper freedom, more freedom from the bondage of self, less egoic interruptions. I'm able to witness my ego now more as a slippery fish that it is, attempting to want to control and compare and do all those things to me, the ego is an okay servant, but it's a real shitty master. So what I've gained is more awareness and more peace of mind, way more peace of mind than I even knew was possible.
How do you connect to the inner being of Tom?
Meditation is probably the greatest gift there is. And how about this, right? This program talks about prayer and meditation as one of the maintenance steps. It doesn't say prayer or meditation. In my experience, is very few people in AA meditate regularly. And very few people get to experience the depth of freedom that awaits them. That tapping into that hidden inner resource regularly so that the mind gets quiet enough that that I get this feeling of connecting with this power and it's not connecting with power. The power is actually already in me. It's just that my thinking doesn't even know that I have this spiritual essence. And so the thinking mind is going to continue to rob me of serenity to the degree that I don't practice meditating. Because meditation is a place where I am able to create a witness in me, an observer of those thoughts that are going on and see that they're just thoughts and that I am not those thoughts and that I can prune those thoughts that are not supportive and nurturing to me or others. So meditation has given me that freedom to see what I could not see before.
Recovery for you, I assume, continues to be progressive. I often say that, recovery should be progressive in a positive step, just as the disease was progressive in a negative way. Absolutely.
It's we say in our book, progress, not perfection. And I read a book one time early on called A Gradual Awakening. And that helped me a lot. It helped me get deeper into meditation and helped me realize that this awakening is it's lifelong, and it's beautiful. I mean, every day, I'll have a few more moments when I'm fully present in the moment, realizing that I am alive and I am this spiritual being having a human experience, and I don't need to take myself seriously at all, or I don't need to take what's going on in the world seriously. So it's like these moment-to-moment little things that add on. I don't know if I'll ever have a day when I have what could be called a perfect day without an intrusive thought, taking me out a little bit away from what I have gained. And you're probably aware of this, but research has shown that we typically have between 60 and 70,000 thoughts a day going through our noggins. Well, and another saying is that the price of freedom is eternal vigilance. I cannot be eternally vigilant over every thought. So some of them that are stored in my subconscious that are from way back, that are self-centered and egocentric and all of that, they'll sneak in and grab me before I am aware that they grab me. But at least I know that I don't like that feeling of agitation or stress or worry or fear. And so I can drop back into my heart space sooner. But it is progress, not perfection, and I think that's a wonderful deal.
What has been the highlight of your recovery journey?
Finding the incredible gift of being of service to others, getting rid of self, and really truly wanting to help others without any agenda. It's like, oh my God, just to sit with a guy and realize that, you're giving this person an hour and a half of your life to just sit and be present with them and keep your heart open to them so that they hopefully will get this and that they'll be able to live the life that they were meant to live, that they deserve to live, and to then share that with others. That's the greatest gift.
I appreciate you sharing your story, Tom. What do you say to someone who is out there struggling right now? Maybe they've had a taste of AA, maybe they haven't. What's the message?
The message is that Alcoholics Anonymous has saved the lives of millions of people, and that it is a beautiful community full of hope and love, and that if you come into the program and just stay and go to meetings regularly and find people and get their numbers and call them and get a sponsor right away to help you navigate through the steps, that you will never, ever feel like you're going to want to drink again.
Tom Askman, 38 years in recovery. He is sober today. Today is all we have. Tom, thank you very much for your story.
Well, you're very welcome, and I appreciate having the opportunity to share it.
I hope you enjoyed that conversation as much as I did. Tom's a great guy, and he's working a strong program. Recovery is living proof. By the way, I want to remind listeners of this podcast, if you'd like to share your story of recovery, regardless of the path that you've chosen. Tom happened to be in AA. There are many other paths to recovery. As long as you have been in continuous recovery for a year or more, we'd like to hear about it. Drop us a note at recoverycoasttocoast@comcast.net. Coming up next, actor RobLowe reflects on his first year in recovery and finding the fun in sobriety. We'll do that in just 30 seconds.
We wasted a lot of years hoping, praying for things to get better. I was desperate to save our family. That's when I made the contact.
She contacted Sundown M Ranch. Sundown's nationally recognized alcohol and drug treatment program teaches family members how to break down the barriers of denial. They are taught the skills needed to deal with addiction as a family.
Now we're making up for lost time. It was the best contact I ever made.
Go to www.sundown.org to learn more.
And now, as promised, a look at year one of recovery through the eyes and heart of actor RobLowe.
When I decided to stop drinking, I could not imagine life socializing. I was like, for example, I love baseball. And I remember thinking, well, I'm obviously never going to a baseball game again, because why would anybody go to a baseball game if they can't drink a beer? What's the point? And I remember thinking, well, I'm never going to celebrate New Year's again. I mean, what's the point? And I remember thinking, well, I'm never going to have fun at the 4th of July again. And listen, for the first year, I just did other things. Like, I didn't put pressure on myself to enjoy those things in the way I did drinking. I found I would do something else fun during that time. I got to be honest, that lasted for me. I don't even think it lasted a year. I think literally within the first year, I was like, fuck it. I don't need to drink for this. And when you're ready, you're ready. You know, you can't be ready because your boyfriend wants you to do it, or your dad thinks you should stop drinking, or you got a DWI and you're worried about your license. None of that worked. Nobody cares. That isn't going to ever do it. You have to be ready. And, look, obviously a lot of people have been helped with Alcoholics Anonymous. I'm a big believer in that. You can just dial, information in your community for the AA hotline, and they will provide you with meetings. It's a great fellowship. And I would recommend that as the first step, and see if you feel at home. My guess is you're going to be. It's a great journey. It's the best thing I ever did, by far. I have more fun today than I ever had in the days when I was drinking and drugging and doing all this stuff. And by the way, I had a lot of fun doing that. And I'd still be doing it if it worked for me. But it stopped. So did I.
Well, that wraps up this edition of the national podcast, Recovery Coast to Coast. If you've enjoyed our podcast, please share it with others. I'd really appreciate that. You can do it via social media, email, or simply by telling someone about it. You can find all of our podcasts at recoverycoasttocoast.org. If you'd like to get in touch, I'd love to hear from you. Our email, recoverycoasttocoast@comcast.net. Also, please hit the subscribe or follow button. That's free. You'll be notified the next time we publish a podcast. And remember, if you know someone who's experiencing problems with alcohol or any other drug, there's a 24-hour national helpline. It's free. It offers free information and confidential treatment referrals. And Spanish-speaking individuals are available as well. 1-800-622-HELP. And join us next time for America's Voice for Recovery, Recovery Coast to Coast, the national podcast. Another shout-out to our sponsoring organization, Sundown M Ranch, where recovery begins. Their website, sundown.org. I'm Neil Scott, reminding you to stay healthy, to live in gratitude, and to be kind to others. Remember, the bright side of addiction is recovery. Pass it on.